Okay, let's talk about biochar. What is it? Where did it come from? Why is it good for the garden? What does it do? And by the way, look at my new shirt. My daughter gave it to me yesterday. It was Father's Day. And this is one of the gifts I got. But anyway, I'm proud of it. It originated actually in the Amazon basin approximately 2,000 years ago. It was discovered several years back, and at first they didn't know why the char was in the ground. They thought it was just from, burning and that kind of thing. But the story goes that there are a couple of guys who were doing experiments with how to make charcoal. And as they did the experimentation, they were dumping their charcoal out back. And they had a big pile of it, and somehow a turnip seed got into that pile. And one of the guys walked out to dump. It was kind of toward the end of the growing season, and he noticed this plant that was absolutely huge. He didn't even know what it was. It was so big, so he pulled it up. And the story goes it was like a 4-pound turnip hanging on the bottom of it. He couldn't figure out why it grew so big, and they started doing a little research. And this is where modern biochar came from. So the story goes. I'm not, this is just what I was told by friends that are in the business. Let's take this back to the beginning. I started out with a business. I actually designed and built robotic projects. And I got involved with a company, they grow plants. It's a fairly big company, and I work with them, and I developed a system with them in collaboration with them. And I started working with some people that were really knowledgeable in the plant community. Actually ended up working with 4 PhDs. And we were studying plant reproduction, and we made a machine which is a hydroponic tissue culture machine. In other words, it clones plants. It takes the equivalent of stem cells in plants, which is actually a leaf bud, and it turns each individual cell in that into a new plant. So basically it's cloning. We did that research, and I sold a couple, and they went to Australia. So I went over to Australia to help install and set up and teach the guy how to use them. And while I was there, this is where biochar came into my life. He had purchased a biochar making machine from a gentleman in New Zealand. Well, when I got back to the States, I started researching biochar and started talking to my friends about it. And they actually explained to me that it was excellent for the soil. And, I started working with one of those PhDs, and we started working with microbes, mycorrhiza, those types of things. It includes funguses, microbes, nematodes, molds. All of that can be good for the soil. And some of the stuff it does is it breaks down the minerals in the soil so the plant can absorb it. I started doing quite a bit of research, and eventually I figured out why the charcoal was so good for the soil, because it actually, I call it motel mycorrhiza, because that's a perfect place for those guys to live. The reason being, when you make biochar, and this is the difference between biochar and the stuff you use on your grill. Now you can use biochar on your grill too, but you can't use brick charcoal in your garden. It doesn't work. When you make biochar, it takes everything in that biomass away except the carbon. And it leaves the integrity of the cell wall. It's a whole cell wall. So where these break, it's the perfect place for these mycorrhiza to live. So they live in this charcoal, plus it holds in a lot of water, gives the plant easier access to water. The other thing about biochar is I know you've all heard about the carbon in the air, the carbon dioxide in the air. When we make this biochar, the way we make it, we don't just burn it. There is a process involved, and I will show you in a different video how to make one and how to make your own biochar. But the method releases very, very little carbon into the atmosphere. It captures all that carbon. And if you put it back into the ground, you've recycled that carbon rather than burning it and letting it go into the atmosphere. So that really is an important thing. Don't get me wrong, I'm not what you'd call a tree hugger. That being said, I do believe that we need to take care of our planet. I believe that we need to put things back when we take it away. I'm not necessarily totally a believer in the warming effect that the greenhouse gases have. I'm torn on it because I've read studies that go both directions. Some say it does cause it, some say it doesn't. So you got to make your own mind up. And I'm actually kind of on the fence on it. I really don't know if it does or not. So I'm not even going to go there. The way I figured out that these microbes like to be around the charcoal is I actually took some and I looked at it under a microscope. And in a normal soil sample away from the area that I have the biochar in the soil, they were pretty evenly distributed. Now don't get me wrong, there's millions of them, even with no biochar. But I did notice when I looked at the biochar under the microscope that had been in the soil, there just seemed to be a lot more of the microbes and nematodes and fungi around this biochar than it was in just plain soil. They seem to congregate there. So that's how I came up with the theory. Now, this was not a scientific study, and I'm not a scientist. I'm just reporting on what I saw under the microscope. See, microbes collected around that biochar, so the only conclusion I could come to is that they like being around it because they've got a shelter. We want a shelter. I guess microbes do. It's really good for the soil. It's important to sequester that charcoal, put it back in the ground. We tried to put this stuff on the market. We were unable to do so. Most of you may not know that if you produce a product that is put in soil, you have to go through a government agency that approves it prior to putting it on sale. We did the study exactly as it was supposed to be done. We filled out all the paperwork. Believe me, it was a ton of that. And we turned it in 4 years in a row and just never got an answer. We didn't get a yes, we didn't get a no, we just didn't get an answer. Never have understood that, but I couldn't continue to do it, so we finally abandoned the idea of putting it on the market. So I'm going to give it away to you. I'm going to give the formula to you so that you can use the methods that I used. And by the way, those studies were done they were a very controlled study. I had PhDs in charge of it. They did it down to the letter, and we got approximately 48% more production from plants with our biochar and worm castings than we did from the two control groups. We had two control groups. We had one that we didn't use anything on, and we had a second that we used standard amounts of fertilizer, pesticides, herbicides, all the things that you use in a non-organic garden. We used them all, and we still came out with 48% more fruit production in our area with the biochar and worm castings than we did in either of the other two. Now, of course, the one with no fertilizer, nothing, did not do as well as the one with fertilizer. I'm not saying that fertilizer doesn't work, because it absolutely does, but we did find out that if you do add fertilizer to the soil, it actually kills some of those bacteria that are in the soil that actually help break it down. The other thing is you need, if you start using this system with the biochar and the worm castings, those microbes need to eat just like we do. So I put leaves, straw, compost. Every year I add a layer. That is food for those microbes. And those microbes will do anything that you need done. They are the natural way to do it. So, we will go through again how to make a very good charcoal maker using the pyrolysis system rather than just burning. I think pyrolysis is cleaner. When you do pyrolysis, you make long chain polymers, and it's very, very, very similar to the gases like propane. It's some machines, some of the control machines. Now, the one that we're going to talk about is just to make the charcoal propane. We had developed an entire farm system. We had the perfect biomass. We found a plant called Arundodonax. Now, it is not legal to have it in Florida and California because they consider it an invasive species. However, this stuff grows 30 feet tall. It's a grass, but it grows really fast, it grows really tall, and you can really make a lot of it in a year's time in a small space. So we make the charcoal usually out of that in a full system. Then you save the gas, so you've got gas for your tractor. You put the carbon in the soil. It makes your plants grow like mad as long as you do it correctly. And I've shown how to plant. So.